What if the Earth just stopped spinning? Not over millions of years, not slowly. Poof! Rotation! Gone. What would actually happen to you? 2 cities? 2 oceans? To the sky above? Stay with me. I'll walk you through the freaky, the weird, and the surprising. And by the end, I'll ask you where you'd wanna hide if this ever went down. Curious? Good. Let's roll. Okay, this isn't a sci-fi thought experiment where aliens press a giant pause button. Well, not exactly, but it is a great way to understand how much of our daily life depends on Earth's spin. I'll break this into timelines. The first seconds and minutes, the first hours and days, the first months and years, and the long-term climate, geology, fallout. I'll also throw in a few pop quiz questions. Drop your answers in the comments so we can argue about it. First, a number to keep in mind. At the equator, the surface of Earth is already moving eastward at about 1,670 kilometers per hour. That's roughly 463 to 464 meters per second. Imagine being on a car going faster than a... If Earth stopped instantly, that motion doesn't just vanish. Everything that's not solidly anchored keeps moving. So what happens first? Boom! The air keeps moving. The atmosphere would slam across the surface at supersonic speeds. Yes, supersonic. Because 463 meters per second is faster than the speed of sound in air. That means mind-blowing winds, enormous shock fronts barreling over the land, and basically anything, loose trees, cars, roofs getting ripped off and hurled. Picture a global mega hurricane, but worse. Question for you. If you had to pick, hide in a basement or climb a mountain? Drop your pick below and tell us why. Water's heavy, and it keeps moving. Oceans, being fluid, would surge eastward with enormous force. Coastal areas would see walls of water slamming inland. Tsunamis the size of buildings in places. Plus, because rotation currently helps shape where water sits, hello equatorial bulge, water would start shifting toward new equilibrium points. Translation. Some regions would flood catastrophically, others might dry out. Think of coastal cities. Could they survive? Spoiler? Many wouldn't. Minute detail, many miss. The rotational force also makes the Earth a little fatter at the equator. Lose that spin, and the planet tries to become more spherical, nudging oceans toward the poles. So yes, polar flooding becomes a thing. Curious where your hometown would end up on that map? Say the city and I'll tell you what likely happens in a follow-up. What your body feels. Tiny change, big context. 240 to 320. You might think, if we stopped, wouldn't I be flung off? But here's a kicker. Centrifugal force from rotation only reduces weight by a tiny bit. At the equator, you currently feel about 0.34% less heavy because of spin. So if Earth stopped, you'd actually weigh about 1/3% more. Practically unnoticeable. The real danger isn't getting flung into space. It's being crushed by the apocalypse of wind and water. Did you think gravity was the big issue? Most folks don't drop a nope. If you guessed wrong. The first hours and days. Chaos in weather and infrastructure 320 to 430. With the Coriolis effect gone? That sideways push? That spins, storms, and steers jet streams? Our familiar weather systems would collapse? Jet streams would fade. Hurricanes, as we know them, would behave differently or vanish, and storm tracks would shift. The immediate result? Weather becomes unpredictable in new, severe ways. Cities built for current climates would suddenly be vulnerable to storms and flooding they never planned for. On top of that, the sudden mass shifts, water rushing around, redistribution of the crust, would create massive earthquakes and volcanic activity. Plates would feel new stresses and release them violently. So those earthquake drills you have to pay attention to. Yep. You'll want to take them seriously. Ask in the comments. If an earthquake strikes first, would you try to leave town or shelter in place? Why? Days 2 months? Day becomes a season 430 to 540. If Earth stopped spinning but kept orbiting the sun, a strange new day-night cycle would appear. Instead of a 24-hour rotation, places on Earth would experience sunlight tied to Earth's orbit. Roughly 6 months of daylight, followed by 6 months of night. Imagine that. The sun hanging in the sky for months, then gone for months. The consequences are massive. Half a year of continuous heating would bake one hemisphere, deserts expanding, crops failing from heat stress. Half a year of darkness would cool the other hemisphere dramatically, sea ice advancing, agriculture collapsing, air circulation driven by heat differences would create extreme winds and persistent weather extremes along the day-night transition zones. The narrow belts between perpetual day and perpetual night. Those twilight edges might become the only mildly livable places. Would you prefer 6 months of sunlight or 6 months of darkness? Type sun or night? Tell us why. Over years, 2 centuries, climate would rewire itself. Ocean currents that depend on rotation and the Coriolis effect, things like the Gulf Stream, would slow or reconfigure, shifting heat transport across the globe. Some researchers think that many ecosystems would collapse or migrate. Others might adapt or thrive in new niches. Bottom line, agriculture, biodiversity, and human infrastructure would need total rethinking. What about Earth's magnetic field? The spinning of the planet contributes to the dynamo effect in the molten outer core that creates our magnetic field. If rotation changes drastically, the geodynamo could weaken over long time scales, reducing our protection from solar and cosmic radiation. That's not an instant problem, but over centuries, it could make space weather more dangerous for satellites and potentially affect complex life. Want a deep dive on whether the magnetic field would disappear entirely? Say magnets in the comments and I'll make a follow-up video. Okay, practical question. If this happened, where would you try to be? Poles have no rotational speed to begin with. They avoid the worst of the wind blast. But the poles are already extreme climates and would probably see massive changes too. The twilight belts, the narrow bands between permanent day and night, might be the least harsh places climate-wise. Underground shelters, probably safer for initial shocks, winds, tsunamis, earthquakes, but long-term survival needs food, water, and a stable microclimate. Ask yourself, would you prep to go underground or try to live through it above ground? Convince us in the comments. Imagine global supply chains fractured, crops failing in large swaths, power grids damaged by storms and quakes. Modern civilization relies on predictable seasons and transport networks. Both get hammered. Energy systems could fail, making refrigeration, medicine, and communications far harder. Society would face migration waves, political strain, and resource conflict. Not cheerful, but realistic. That said, humans are resilient. Communities might adapt. Vertical farms in milder zones, new trade routes, and technology to shield against extremes. But it'd take decades, and thousands to millions could be displaced in the process. Which city do you think would survive best? New York, Denver, Miami, or Anchorage? Pick one and explain why. Common myths. Myth 1. We'd all fly into space. False. We stay put because gravity wins. Myth 2. The sun would vanish. Nope. Orbit still happens. Only rotation changes day length. Myth 3. Everything instantly freezes. Not true. Some regions would get hotter, some colder, but instant global freeze? Not likely. See, wild, but nuance matters. So imagine the sky freezing in place, the wind like a freight train, and months of daylight that turn cities into ovens. Scary, right? Now imagine the human side. Mass migrations, new borders, and the question of who gets the habitable twilight. If you want more ILL Map Your City's Fate, tell me your hometown in the comments and ILL do a series. If Earth stopped rotating, City Edition, alright? Which bit blew your mind the most? The supersonic winds, the 6-month day, the shifting oceans, or the idea of polar refugees? Drop the most shocking line in the comments and smash that like button if you want to follow up where I map specific cities and show likely climate and survival outcomes. Subscribe if you're into weird science explained with real numbers and plain talk. Until next time, keep looking out.